大家晚上好。咁今日好我哋係澳門特別行政區政府文化局過嚟呢邊開嘅一個新書推介會嚟嘅。咁我哋呢本書咧叫做《澳門土生菜文化：從家傳菜餚到國際美饌》新書推介會。咁土生菜咧係由起源於葡萄牙，喺當時大航海時代咧，喺我哋亞洲同埋其他地方嘅一個烹飪足跡嚟嘅。咁佢哋經過幾百年嘅一個融合同埋融合之後咧，咁變成咗一個好獨特嘅一個文化產品。咁今日我哋好榮幸可以邀請到本書作者、倫敦大學金像學院飲食社會學哲學博士 Dr. Annabel Jackson， 同埋本書其中嘅2位譯者黎莊林女士 Stephanie Lee 同埋徐彩燕女士 Swallow Shu。咁今日嘅推介會咧會分成3個環節，首先由作者同埋譯者咧做一個分享先嘅，咁然之後咧就會由作者同譯者咧有一個討論嘅環節，咁然之後就係一個 Q&A 嘅 session 咁樣。咁另外有一個我哋土生菜嘅一個值得我哋去留意嘅就係我哋喺2019年咧土生葡人美食烹飪技藝咧喺2019年錄入咗澳門非物質文化遺產名錄入邊嘅。咁其實呢個好已經備受關注同埋認可啦。咁今日我哋先喺開始之前咧，我想問一問大家如果我哋因為講者係講英文嘅，咁之後我哋譯者咧可能會用中文去翻譯嘅。咁如果我哋用廣東話定係普通話，你哋會方便啲？如果大家冇意見，我哋就由講者去決定用咩語言，好唔好？大家有冇意見？廣東話 ，OK， 用嘅係廣東話，大家都聽得明廣東話 ，OK， 好。咁我哋先將個台交翻俾本書嘅作者Annabel 去介紹先。Thank you, Annabel.
Thank you for the introduction. So as you gather, I'll be talking in English, and then Swallow will do a quick translation of each, perhaps after each slide, and then we'll play it by ear with other parts of this evening. I might add right at the beginning that this book that was published in 2020 led to me actually doing a PhD because a professor friend said, after he knew I was doing this book and said, it's time you did a PhD, I'll supervise you. So if we're talking a little bit about the journey of a writer or an academic or whatever, that's quite an interesting point about that journey. However, I think we should go right back to the beginning. Here we go. This was my very first book that I wrote 30 years ago, and I shouldn't really say rewriting it, should I? Because you can't really rewrite something that's 30 years old. I'm having another bash at understanding what's happening in Macau with regards to gastronomy 30 years later with massive change. Of course, I was working for South China Morning Post as a journalist and had sort of discovered a very nice Macanese restaurant that I reviewed, and thereafter started to write a little bit about the Macanese more broadly speaking. I would say I'm a food anthropologist, but perhaps I'm an anthropologist looking at life through the lens of food, let's say. And so I think that's my point, which we might discuss further, whether you can actually start with food or start with culture. But that would be possibly an interesting question, Stephanie, later, isn't it? What was important about this book, and it was an early one in English about Macau food culture, is that, and I didn't know it was going to be this when I started researching it, that it talked about a triumvirate of cuisines in Macau. Cantonese, fairly obviously, Portuguese maybe, but also Macanese. And it really would seem that this was the first time that Macanese cuisine had been privileged or highlighted, at least in English possibly in Portuguese before that, but it was quite a forerunner, so very much added to the literature in those early days. And then in 2003, so something like 10 years later, I published a Macanese cookbook, which again would have been very early, and it wasn't brilliant, but it really started, I think, some balls rolling. And I hope that I was quite influential in getting Macanese food and culture a little bit more out into the forefront. And since then, there have been many publications in different languages, including Japanese.
作者頭先咧就講，其實作者以前係同南華早報係有寫食物方面嘅文章嘅。咁咧佢咧就因為咧係去過一間澳門嘅一間土生菜食館，之後就同澳門嘅土生菜之類嘅文化就產生咗聯繫啦。咁佢咧就喺第30年前咧就寫咗一本佢第一部以澳門土生菜為主題嘅英文著作，亦應該係關於呢個澳門土生菜或者葡國菜啦，因為土生菜係有好多葡國元素嘅英文版本嘅著作，即係以前係會有其他作者係會有用葡文寫嘅。
Fast forward to 2016, and I was approached by an institute in Macau to put in a proposal for funding to research a paper, a kind of East meets West bridge through the lens of cuisine. And indeed, I was successful in achieving that funding. I wrote a paper called Memory and Identity, Macanese Cuisine in the Diaspora. And that paper formed a large percentage of the book we're talking about tonight. I'm just thinking I need to qualify the term Macanese because we have this problem, at least in English, and I believe in Chinese as well, that it is anything and anyone from Macau is commonly referred to as Macanese. And this is really a misnomer and causes all kinds of different problems at different levels. The Macanese people will consider themselves the indigenous people of Macau, because when the Portuguese arrived in Macau, 1550s, there was really no one living in Macau. A few fishing families living on boats, but it was basically uninhabited. Ergo, it wasn't really Chinese per se. So the Macanese, identity issues we have here, who gets to call themselves Macanese, that's a kind of a side issue. Let's just agree for the time being that Macanese people have Portuguese ancestry and all kinds of other bloods, Southeast Asian, Japanese, African, no Chinese until the late 19th century. And today, if someone is half Portuguese, half Chinese, they might call themselves Macanese, but purists would probably say that isn't Macanese. So if we take that as a starting point, since we're talking about Macanese cuisine today, just imagine a Macanese person has Portuguese blood, possibly Southeast Asian, possibly Japanese, possibly African. Gives us a kind of a sense of the culture of those people. We're not talking about a cross between Portuguese and Chinese. Now, it had become obvious, even beforehand, over in 99 and subsequently, that there were more Macanese living in the diaspora than in Macau. Again, because of identity classification issues, we don't really have numbers, but let's just say, and some people will massively disagree with me, that there are 10,000 Macanese living in Macau and 40,000 living in the diaspora. So my idea was, for this research paper, what happens when more of a community is living outside of Macau than inside? What happens to the cuisine? Ergo, sort of, what happens to identity? I was quite lucky in my research in that there's a movement called the CASA movement, home movement, which exists all around the world. So it's organizations that Macanese people in the diaspora can join. So there are CASAs in Australia, North America, Brazil, Portugal, even one in UK now. So I was actually able to reach out to quite a large proportion, potentially, of Macanese, all those interested in engaging with me in a survey about cuisine. With my supervisor, we estimate that maybe 2,000 people were reached, and we had a response rate of about 15%, which was deemed quite good as a research result. And I also did some semi-structured interviews in Macau with Macanese within Macau.
Hello， 係咁作者佢喺依一 part 佢就介紹咗佢曾經做咗一個研究，咁就係呢個研究咧就基本上係構成咗呢本書嘅一個基礎嘅。咁喺呢度咧佢就講咗 Macanese 土生葡人呢一個詞彙，佢係有好多歧義嘅，因為無論係英文定係中文 Macanese 佢都可以係意味住喺澳門生活嘅人，或者係中葡混血嘅人，或者係澳門土生葡人。咁所以喺呢度我哋就大家都定義為就呢本書嘅語彙嚟講，咁我哋就將 Macanese 土生葡人定義為呢一個族群。咁呢個族群咧，佢根據作者嘅一啲調查啦，咁佢嗰個人口數量可能係大家會有啲唔同嘅歧義或者具體有幾多，但係作者佢嗰個調查之後，大概係有10萬土生葡人住喺澳門，咁有40萬土生葡人佢係散居全球各地嘅。咁冇錯啦，呢位觀眾朋友係唔係好認同？咁唔好意思，1萬，唔好意思，1萬4萬散居全球各地，係啦 ，OK， 唔好意思。咁樣咁作者佢就想探討翻呢個當你一個族群有更多嘅人散居喺佢原居住地嘅時候，會對佢哋嘅身份同埋佢哋嘅飲食文化產生一咩影響？咁呢個亦都係作者佢去寫呢本書嘅其中一個契機。
補充少少，作者咧係佢呢本書咧係根據一個研究論文寫成嘅。咁佢當時咧係曾經係發咗係成2000份問卷，係調查過散居世界各地2000個 Macanese 就土生葡人嘅。OK。
Thank you. So what I would like to explore perhaps now in terms of explaining what the book is about is that I've found 3 main research core findings which I want to go into now. And the first of them is absolutely about food and identity. It's a theme which I had already been discovering in the 2003 cookbook I mentioned earlier, that all of the people I interviewed talked about food and childhood, food and mother, food and grandmother. So this was already a strong theme. So one of my questions in my Survey Monkey related very specifically to this for the Macanese in the diaspora. They were asked in the survey, how often do you eat Macanese food? And some respondents in San Francisco or Toronto said, I eat Macanese food once a year, which was presumably at the CASA, which actually shows how important the CASA movement has been around the world for the maintenance of Macanese identity. Even if people are only eating Macanese once a year, which is probably on Christmas Eve, it remains very, very strong part of their identity. And this came up again and again. And I think what we're looking at now, what we can glean, is that the patois, the Macanese patois, is almost gone. Other cultural specifics to the Macanese community have gone. There used to be some games that were played on the streets, some special music, all gone. And in post-colonial Macau, where the prestige of the Macanese has dropped because they were just a tier below the Portuguese, and they were very worried about their status. And one of the reasons I think that the food is such a strong part of identity, it's almost like this: food, it's mine. Food is all I've got left as part of my identity now. And it's like, don't mess with it, but we'll come back to that in a minute. And it's so strong that I find this a really incredible quote. I should probably explain Minchi, because we're not really going to get around to understanding exactly what is Macanese food, but this dish explains some of the complexities of it. Minchi is a completely made-up word. It's probably a subversion, if that's the right word, of English mince or minced. And it is widely held that Minchi was created not in Macau, but among the Macanese community in Hong Kong, which was strong. Macanese were the bedrock of HSBC for many, many, many years, and there was a Macanese community here up near Cane Road. So minchi is minced meat. When I was a kid, if I would go to my grandmother's on Wednesdays, say after school, I would have minced beef with onions and mashed potato, right? This is all too familiar, except that it's got light soy, dark soy, probably a sweet soy like ketchup mayonnaise or something. Usually so with an egg on top, made with olive oil, which my grandmother wouldn't have had, bay leaf, cubes of fried potato, steamed rice, bread, I mean, all of it, right? But this is like the number one dish, and Macanese all relate to this, to the point that we can talk about food and identity, but food being embedded in sense of self. But here we even see a food item like minchi becomes emblematic of even the place of Macau and the nostalgia. Even you're in the diaspora, maybe you haven't come back to Macau or never come back to Macau. It's right there.
Mm. 作者頭先就話咧，其實佢個研究係有3個發現嘅，就佢喺研究當中就通過問卷問咗好多問題啦。咁啲受訪者亦都係反映翻俾佢知話，原嚟佢哋識嘅土生菜同佢媽媽、同佢哋嘅媽媽、同佢哋嘅即係嫲嫲或者外婆嘅回憶啊，就都係好多聯繫嘅。咁佢嘅問題當中亦都會問到佢哋你幾耐會煮一餐 Macanese food 土生菜啊？咁即係諸如此類嘅問題啦。咁由呢個調查研究當中咧，佢就係體會到其實土生菜同埋土生葡人嘅身份係息息相關，係佢哋身份當中嘅好重要嘅一部分，好重要嘅一環嘅。咁鑑於目前咧，因為土生葡人佢澳門人口唔多，佢係離散喺全世界各地。咁同埋佢土生葡人文化身份入邊，除咗土生菜之外咧，仲有一個係白拖，即係土生土語，亦都係喺度式微緊。所以呢個土生葡人社群咧係好憂慮，好憂慮。所以佢哋係會將土生菜或者土生飲食咧係作為自己嘅身份嘅入邊嘅一個好強烈嘅一種認同。咁作者仲提到呢個圖所示嘅一個叫做緬字嘅菜式。緬字咧係澳門其實好多茶餐廳都有嘅。咁緬字同埋土生葡人嘅身份已經係成為土生葡人嘅身份象徵㗎啦。但係咧好有趣嘅就係緬字唔係喺澳門產生嘅，係喺香港。咁緬字呢道菜其實好簡單，佢有飯係用肉碎，好似係牛肉、豬肉都得嘅。緬字牛肉、豬肉就加洋葱，再加薯仔，再加欖油 （olive oil）， 即係好簡簡單一道菜，但係就係已經係深植喺佢哋嘅記憶同埋文化同埋身份入邊，對於土生葡人。
The second core finding is around the notion of the recipe. And I don't think the concept of recipe or the problematics around recipes are unique to Macanese. If we're going to call Macanese a fusion food or a Creole or a hybrid, whichever term we prefer or dislike less, let's say, the idea that food cooking is passed down orally in the kitchen, normally by grandma or mum. And in my research findings, I find there's a disdain for the recipe. And if you use recipes, it's like a weakness that you haven't listened to your mum properly. You haven't been observant enough in the kitchen, that it's some kind of shortfall. Oh, but just occasionally, says one respondent, if I forgot something, I call Auntie and I ask her to remind me. So that's one thing. The second thing, there are recipes around, and I'm going to pull up a slide in a minute, and now I'm going to go slightly theoretical here, but the broader concept of the recipe in Clifford Geertz's anthropologist's point of view, the writing down of something that we cook is really part of this cultural construction, and a dish that you cook at home and eat with your family becomes something different and something other. And we're really seeing a tension here on a number of levels, a couple of which I'll mention briefly. In my research, it's been very difficult to get recipes. Obviously, I'm not Macanese, no one's going to share with me. A few people who worry about the cuisine dying have shared with me or invited me into the kitchen to watch what they're doing and make some notes. However, I did get hold of an anthology of recipes, which is indicated was typed on a manual typewriter in Shanghai in the 30s. And this was the coming together of Macanese diaspora from around the world saying, okay, let's share our recipes and probably let's work on some more substitutions, because I'm in Johannesburg and you're in Sydney and what do we do now? Or you're in Shanghai, etc. I've never seen this anthology in Macau. I was given to it in Hong Kong by an elderly Macanese woman. So you could see the lovely... I pull this up kind of for a number of reasons. A lot of recipes in this anthology begin with phrases like, prepare the pheasant in the usual way. And then you'll go through a recipe which I'm trying to cook myself and they've missed out, they're incomplete. They're just aid memoirs, right? This is one of the points about historic recipes. And you can't see very well here, but halfway through the first recipe, which is for duck's liver, in capitals it said improvement on this recipe. If the chopped garlic, blah, blah, lemon juice do it, this is a much better way to do it. And also through this anthology, the quote-unquote editor is pulling out the best recipe for a different dish. Oh, but this one's much better. Oh, and this one's the convenience one. It doesn't take long, but it's not like it used to be. These are lovely pieces of social history that we weave between English and Portuguese, and then we've got some Chinese pinyin. Maybe that's for the servant to go to the market or just a reminder. We've got pig's trotters and cow nerves, livers, an idea of what people were eating. The third major finding was this very core concept, as in what is Macanese cuisine? And it's contended deeply. Some people would say, oh, it's a cross between Portuguese and Chinese. Some would say, well, it's very Southeast Asian. Some would say this and that. And when asked, what's your favorite Macanese dish? Some Macanese would answer with a dish that I would consider to be Portuguese. This has bigger problems. The first one is that there is something, other cuisines beside Macanese and Macau, and one of them I want to call localized Portuguese, which is really literally a Chinese take on Portuguese food, and you can find that in Chao Chang Teng and different restaurants in Macau. So this is very confusing, and it's a big issue for the tourists and for the hotels. The hotels, casino hotels, are required to have a certain percentage of Portuguese Macanese dishes in their restaurants, but they never differentiate between the two. It's difficult to know which is which. And it's not just the Macanese who don't like this, it's the Portuguese don't like their cuisine being sort of compromised when a dish that is Macanese is being billed as Portuguese. So this has a big problem for a lot of people, let's say.
咁作者佢喺呢一 part 佢就大概講咗一下獲取土生菜菜譜嘅困難啦，因為對於好多土生葡人嚟講，食譜咧佢嘅傳遞咧點樣做一道菜咧，佢哋唔係由菜譜嚟學習嘅，而係通過喺廚房睇佢哋媽媽或者嫲嫲婆婆嚟煮餸嚟學嘅。咁當佢哋可能有時自己煮嘅時候咧，覺得我唔記得點樣做呢一道菜喎，或者某一個程序嘅時候，佢哋就會打個電話問下佢哋嘅阿姨啊、婆婆啊咁樣。咁佢哋有啲人係會認為寫落嚟嘅菜譜咧係唔正宗嘅，你係唔識煮餸先至要去睇菜譜嘅。咁樣跟住就同樣作者亦都講到喺人類學嚟講咧，書寫菜譜係作為構建文化嘅一個步驟。咁樣，但係家庭嘅烹飪咧，亦都但係同時就會同呢個文化構建嘅過程係有衝突嘅。咁喺佢揾搜集土生菜菜譜嘅過程中，遇到好多困難，因為實在冇太多現存嘅菜譜。咁亦非常之幸運嘅有一位喺澳門嘅土生葡人朋友交俾佢一本菜譜集，咁就係呢一本。咁大家可以睇到其實佢上邊寫嘅嘢，如果放大嘅話，咁其實佢唔係一個好傳統嘅，或者我哋所認知中嘅菜譜嘅寫法，因為其實入邊更多嘅係屬於好似回憶錄咁樣嘅一種，可能係一啲筆記隨便寫下就係咁樣做。咁跟住可能另外一個收到呢一份菜譜嘅人，佢可能會話：我覺得咁樣做唔啱啊，我要加啲檸檬汁。咁樣入邊係好多唔同嘅人嘅筆記組成咗呢一本菜譜集。咁因為每一個人佢都有自己對於土生菜嘅認識，而且係好強烈嘅意見。咁所以喺土生葡人之間，究竟點樣去定義土生菜，亦都係一個非常大嘅問題，一個非常大嘅爭議嘅。咁好多時有人會認為係中葡混合，或者可能係東南亞菜更加多。咁好多時你如果喺澳門見到好多土生菜，咁可能佢會有係一啲好經典嘅葡國菜喺裏邊。咁呢一個定義嘅話，我哋都無法定義。咁呢個亦都係呢本書同埋作者喺搜集菜譜中間遇到嘅好大嘅一個問題。咁土生菜點樣定義？我諗係需要繼續探討。OK，Zola 有冇補充
？I quickly go back to the idea of the recipe. There's growing, even more growing concern in Macau that Macanese cuisine is being lost, and what do we do about that? And there is actually an official recipe bank now of 30 core dishes from the Macanese cuisine, which is being kept at the UTM, the University of Tourism in Macau now. I'm not sure if it's open to the public yet. Last time I looked, it wasn't. Now, the act of preservation, as I think we can all see, reducing the Macanese canon to 30 dishes is already quite extraordinary. The fact that now one recipe is set in stone, what we can see then is Macanese cuisine becoming like a museum piece. The creativity of a fusion cuisine over decades, if not hundreds of years, just being halted But on one hand, this is what the Macanese seem to want, and they get a lot of Macanese are getting very upset when other chefs start to try to modernize it a little bit or use a slightly better cut of pork, or how about not using canned olives? We could actually use a high quality olive. Now, I think we really have to understand in terms of food and identity where the Macanese are coming from. And there is one chef who has been trying so hard and been criticized so much, but he's now coming up with, okay, this is traditional Macanese, this is contemporary Macanese, and he will soon be doing dual menus. And he's doing something very smart. So on the left there, we have a dish called la casa, which if you eat in a basic Macanese restaurant, that's what it looks like, right? So it's rice vermicelli with shrimps, coriander, flavored with the Macanese fish, semi-fermented fish sauce called balichao. So what this chef is doing is saying, I'm not substituting anything. I'm not leaving anything out. I'm going to reimagine and recreate. So you can see on the left, that's a basic cafe. On the right, this is what the chef is doing. So he's taking the rice vermicelli and making a little rice wrap. Inside, he's got chopped prawn and coriander. This is in a 5-star hotel dining room. He puts that on the bottom of a beautiful bowl, pours a very sophisticated broth over the top, and the balichao is served on the side to taste. He said, the taste is exactly the same. It just looks gorgeous. It fits better with what people want to eat now. And he's very sure that if we don't change, but even in this very sophisticated way, nothing's been changed dramatically. We've just reformed and reimagined. So this is very, very nice to see what he's doing, even though he's criticized. And I'm just going to finish on this slide because this is something very exciting that's happening in Macau now. So we've got 2 top chefs from Lisbon, both of whom have 2 Michelin stars restaurants in Lisbon, incredibly excited about being in Macau. And Chef Jose said, here we are again, 500 years later. Let's see what happens. You know, let's rub up against local cuisine again and see what happens now. And Chef Enrique has always had a bit of a Asian touch to his cuisine, particularly Japanese, but he's now working on dishes incorporating dried spices and so on. And Chef Jose says, you know, in Lisbon, no one wants to eat pork trotters anymore, but here everyone loves them. And he said, I'm deconstructing duck rice to make like the duck, the king, because duck is so highly favoured in this part of the world. And he's really excited about doing the kind of cooking that he can't do at home anymore. And Chef Enrique said to me, I love working in Macau because people will pay. You know, I can get the best lobster and people will pay for it. So in the middle of all this tension about what's happening to Macanese cuisine, we've got this incredibly dynamic scenario, which is these 2 really high-profile Portuguese chefs just really, really embracing Macau again.
喺呢一 part 咧，作者就主要講咗食譜。其實好多食譜咧都流失咗啊。咁我哋或者土生葡人社群有咩可以做嘅咧？佢都提出呢個問題。據佢所知咧，而家澳門旅遊局應該係有保存咗34款啊，30零款啦，土生菜嘅食譜嘅。咁都其實大家想唔想佢即係呢個咁好嘅飲食文化就成為博物館入邊嘅展品呢？所以我哋或者讀者或者大家公眾都要即係好好諗呢個問題。咁好多正宗嘅土生廚師，其實佢對於而家土生菜嘅現狀呢係比較 upset 嘅。佢哋亦都會話佢哋係 係想堅持翻傳統嘅做法，但係時代又要進步，又要與時並進，所以而家土生菜都有係兩派，一派就傳統嘅，一派就係現代版、現代化。咁作者就舉咗頭先 slide 度都舉咗一個例子啦，就係米粉湯啊嘛，咩叫 La Casa 米粉湯。左邊嗰個咧就係一般嘅茶餐廳或者土生葡人佢哋嘅款式就係咁樣。右邊嗰個就係星級酒店，一個係好 high class 嘅 presentation， 就賣相係好靚嘅。即係兩款唔同嘅版本，其實佢哋嘅味道係差唔多嘅啫。咁土生菜就誕生喺500年前，咁500年之後，其實佢何去何從呢？咁作者亦都係舉咗而家澳門，其實澳門博企或者好多星級酒店，佢都係有提供翻土生 Macanese food 土生菜嘅食譜俾大家揀嘅。咁佢頭先都提到有2個係比較出名嘅星廚啦，佢哋都喺度夾新緊土生菜，因為澳門其實係有一個消費嘅市場，同埋個食材都比較好。咁我哋或者作者都好期待睇下500年之後土生菜又會演變成點樣？呢個係值得大家期待嘅。下邊就係由我作為譯者講翻翻譯呢本書《澳門土生菜文化》嘅一個翻譯歷程。咁其實我哋喺做呢本書嘅過程中呢，都係有一啲挑戰嘅，因為本身呢個項目就係通過一個 tender 嚟嘅。咁 tender 咧肯定係即係條件就係時間係好緊迫。咁呢本書咧總共其實係有我哋個書稿截到係有68,000字，但係合約就規定我哋係要35日之內完成。咁點樣去應付呢個即係好似有啲艱難嘅任務呢？通常做翻譯係要講連貫，就講 consistence。咁當然一個譯者做會比較好，但係為咗 meet 到呢個 deadline，我哋係組織咗一個團隊，其實一個3人嘅團隊，就係我自己同埋 Stephanie， 仲有一個係Faisal 李先生，佢係冇嚟嘅。咁我自己本身我係就做過一啲澳門口述歷史叢書嘅翻譯，其中之前亦都有翻譯過關於土生菜嘅。咁 Stephanie 咧就係一個美食嘅田野研究者，加上一個係好成功嘅 YouTuber 啦。佢同 Chris 係有一個美食頻道嘅喺 YouTube。咁再翻嚟講，咁其實呢本書佢呢個牽涉到嘅廣度同埋深度都係幾大嘅。佢其實你可以由呢本書，即係由飲食、由土生美食去係見到係成個葡國大航海時代或者葡國以前葡萄牙以前嘅全球擴張嘅足跡。Let me do a little bit translation or interpretation. Well, I'm looking back at the translation process because we have a very tight deadline. We had to translate like 68,000 words within 35 days. That's what the contract said. So to deliver this, we have to organize a team of 3 translators. That's myself and Stephanie and another translator who does not come today. Myself have translated some books on Macau topics, including a previous one on Macanese food. And Stephanie is a food researcher and a YouTuber on food and culture. So we do this job together. 然後再講翻周奕呢本書嘅挑戰啦。頭先都講到佢係有個歷史個廣度，亦都有即係佢個跨度係好大。同埋最難嘅咧，最難個部分就係佢牽涉咗，因為土生菜佢係葡國，佢係有佢土生菜入邊佢有非洲嘅影響。有南亞嘅影響，有印度嘅影響，有東南亞有馬來嘅影響，有中菜嘅影響，有廣東菜嘅影響。所以如果你哋睇食譜，亦都會睇到佢入邊係混雜咗好多好似謎題一樣嘅詞彙或者一樣嘅語言嘅。所以我哋係要做好多，我哋喺成個翻譯嘅過程中係做個 research 做到好多。或者我舉一啲即係比較有趣嘅例子俾大家睇，就係我哋咧係會建立咗一個詞彙表嘅喺翻譯過程中。咁呢個詞彙表牽涉到嘅數據係有咩呢？詞彙表入邊係有 list 咗300幾種嘅食材或者食物名稱，其中可能有馬來語，可能有非洲唔知咩土語，或者有果啊嗰啲語言。咁咧咁作者亦都係即係引經據典啦。作者其實喺本書中咧，大家冇將呢本書可以將呢本書當做一本係美食啊或者美食文化嘅書，但係作者係一個女性，我覺得佢寫呢本書佢係有一個溫柔嘅筆觸，佢係亦都引用一啲文學經典啊，或者一啲詩啊，甚至一個廚師寫嘅詩，所以係幾有趣嘅。咁作者喺書中咧就有引用咗係10幾本書嘅，同埋人名咧，因為佢嘅採訪，佢嘅調查訪問，佢都話係頭先講話係採訪過係成2000個人嘅問卷調查。咁我哋亦都係要好多人名會貫穿喺本書度，佢可能反覆出現。所以我哋嘅詞彙表亦都係包括咗成160個人名。咁地點咧就有50多個地點，包括餐廳啊或者一啲location 嘅地點。咁呢本簡單嚟講，大家可以稱佢為一本係食物人類學嘅書啦。咁亦都係用咗係成40幾個人類學嘅術語嘅。Okay, so I'm retrospecting on how we work through this book. We have to build a glossary because this book covers a lot of food materials or dish names, and they may come from Africa or Indian or Boer or Malay or Chinese or Cantonese, and some are really mysterious. We have to do a lot of research work. I'm quoting examples that from our glossary you can see how it is. We listed more than 300 kinds of food material ingredients and food names, and there are around 13 book titles in this book, because the author wrote on food, but she's also a very feminist author. Her book quotes something from literature and poems. That's what I like. And if you read the book, you may like it. So you don't read it as a food book. You may read it as a literature book also. And the writer also mentioned that she have interviewed like 2,000 Macanese people. So on our glossary, we have like 160 names of persons. These persons may appear here and there in the book, so we have to make them consistent. And there are like more than 50 location names or restaurant names. And also there are 40-something anthropological terms。然後再回顧一下我哋嘅工作方法啦。咁就係我哋3位譯者各負責一部分內容嘅，同埋其實本書背後仲有好多注釋、好多 looks， 仲有好多 reference， 因為佢 draw reference， 佢係根據一個研究嚟做嘅，好似亦都有好多學術性嘅 reference， 所以我哋係各自負責內容嗰部分咧，嗰個譯者亦都負責翻書後邊嘅 looks 同埋嗰個 reference 嘅。咁頭先講過，亦都係建立詞彙表啦。咁關於食譜嗰部分，因為呢本書首先亦都係一個研究土生菜嘅呢個食物呢個美食演變，所以佢牽涉到好多食譜。食譜部分咧，主要都係 Stephanie 負責嘅。真係好多得今次有 Stephanie 幫手。咁因為佢亦都係自己有研究同埋烹飪土生菜嘅，所以就俾咗好多 insight 我哋喺個翻譯過程中關於食譜啊各方面。然後咁做翻譯咧，做完翻譯之後，仲要牽涉到一個編輯，即係 edit， 就有初稿、幾稿，其實係好多稿嘅。就翻譯，如果大家有涉及呢方面嘅工作，會知道。咁所以我同 Stephanie 都係有共同係編輯嘅，以確保佢準確啊，同埋有一致啊咁樣。最終嘅校對咁都係我做嘅。其實翻譯完成之後咧，係6個月先做校對，即係話我哋已經係 cool off 好耐啦，又要翻轉頭去做嘢。等於呢個分享會，其實亦都係等咗好耐，咁亦都係大家再去 refamiliar 翻啲書嘅內容啊，或者當時嘅工作情況啊咁。然後翻譯過程中呢，亦都係牽涉到大量嘅搜索，同埋要反覆咁推敲一啲飲食用語啊、飲食術語啊，同埋殖民時期嘅用詞嘅。因為有啲字詞咧，如果關於 colonial 或者 colonial 嗰啲詞咧，就比較敏感，所以出版方咧亦都要我哋斟酌。咁最棘手嘅咧就係書中咧就牽涉到一啲好遙遠嘅地方，例如印度啊、馬來啊、斯里蘭卡啊、非洲啊、巴西啊嗰啲翻譯謎題，咁我哋都要一一破解嘅。所以都係做嘅過程中都係又有趣，亦都有啲 painful。OK， 下邊就由 Stephanie 嚟。OK， so looking back a little on the translation work method. So each of the translator will be responsible for a part of the content, but there were also looks and reference books, the book names at the end of the book. So we also do that part corresponding to our part of content, and building the glossary is very important for this translation project. And for editing, each translation project must go through editing. So it's Stephanie and me responsible for the editing. And it's myself doing the final proofreading after 6 months. After 6 months, we have to go back again to the contents and do the proofreading. And what's challenging for this translation project is that we have to research and think about the wordings for some food terminology terms and colonial terms, because the publisher is kind of sensitive, some wordings are sensitive. And what's more challenging is the book the book involves some very, very far away places like in India, Malaysia, Sri Lanka, Africa, Brazil, and some food-related mysteries, and we have to resolve them one by one. Yeah. Okay, now it's Stephanie's turn to share about some interesting things related to this book. 而家由 Stephanie 分享一下呢本書一啲有趣嘅嘢。
OK， 咁依家大家我哋嚟玩啲輕鬆啲嘅嘢。講完呢個好辛苦 painful 嘅翻譯過程之後，咁呢一 part 主要我都會用廣東話嚟講啦。咁但係每一張 slide 都會有相對應嘅英文嘅。咁好啦，呢一 part 大概其實就係用一啲例子嚟睇下我哋當時翻譯過程中遇到一啲比較特殊嘅詞，點樣去解決佢？因為對於我哋嚟講，其實佢就係一個謎語，就係一個 puzzle 嚟嘅。咁樣依家我哋大家一齊嚟重新感受一下，有啲比較令我哋記憶深刻嘅一啲詞語。OK， 呢度第一個滴油，有冇觀眾可以估到係咩啊？Do anyone has any ideas of what this is? No? Yeah. Us neither back then. OK. 咁好彩，非常之幸運嘅咧，喺後邊嘅 reference 入邊咧，作者係解釋咗滴油其實佢係黃豆發酵之後首次提取嘅成分嚟嘅。咁作為一種高級豉油。So from the reference, we can tell that it's actually a premium soy sauce. So this is a very important link for us. So, 關注廣式烹飪嘅朋友應該知道，其實粵菜入邊係有一種材料食材叫做滴豬油嘅。唔知大家有冇用過呢？滴豬油。咁滴豬油佢依家係我哋比較常用嘅一個名啦。如果你出去買菜嘅話，你係可以買得到呢一樣嘢嘅。咁佢得名於首次提取嘅豉油非常之傑，好似一滴一滴珍珠咁樣滴落嚟，咁所以就起咗個非常之吸引人嘅名叫做滴豬油。咁亦都叫豬油啦，或者叫上豬油。咁依家如果大家去買嘅話咧，有啲就可能加咗糖漿啊，即係去令佢更加傑一啲。咁所以就買嘅時候可以睇清楚。So, 滴油 is actually like 滴豬油 in contemporary Cantonese. It's still a existing product in the market, but it may have some syrup in it. 大家可以見到呢幾個係香港牌子，大媽啦、九龍醬園啦、冠珍啦，都仲有做嘅。咁佢哋係比較老牌嘅調味品公司，咁其實佢哋嘅產品都唔錯嘅。咁大家如果有感興趣，可以去買嚟試下。So these are the brands that still makes this product these days. I think these three are all from Hong Kong. So if you are ever curious, you can also just get this product and try it for yourself and see if it's actually more premium than your regular soy sauce. Okay, next one. Okay, jaggery. 有冇觀眾朋友知道係咩啊？係，冇錯，係糖嚟嘅。咁我哋當時睇到 jaggery 嘅時候，其實都幾困惑㗎，因為 jaggery 通常如果你去搜 Google 嘅話咧，你會發現佢係依樣嘢。大家可能喺中意煮東南亞菜，可能會發現。So jaggery is usually made from sugarcane syrup, and it's widely used in Southeast Asian cookings and Myanmar as well. And when we were living in Thailand, we usually use this one. So as we know, it's sugarcane juice. So jaggery 佢呢種糖咧，一般就係蔗糖，比較冇點樣提純嘅一種蔗糖。咁當我哋去諗，佢點解如果喺土生葡菜入邊用呢種糖嘅時候， 喺當時嘅條件下，佢哋會係如果係用喺廣東賣菜，喺澳門賣菜，你會買邊種糖咧？咁我哋當時咧諗到嘅就應該係大家都會見到嘅片糖或者黃糖，因為黃糖咧佢係亦都係冇提純過嘅蔗糖糖漿做出嚟嘅糖嚟嘅。咁所以我哋當時咧喺書裏邊咧就選擇咗將 Jaggery 譯成片糖嘅，即係考慮到澳門嘅呢個買菜嘅呢個情況。咁但係後來因為我自己喺泰國生活嘅經歷，同埋睇翻即係做翻土生葡菜嘅時候，了解到其實喺當時嘅社會情景下，同埋葡國喺東南亞嘅貿易咧，咁好可能佢哋係會用翻棕櫚糖嘅。咁以前嘅棕櫚糖其實亦都係好深色嘅，咁所以大家喺煮菜嘅時候係可以考慮翻用片糖或者棕櫚糖。So we decided to translate Jaggery into as 片糖 as slab sugar, considering what people may buy from the market. But later, as I was living in Thailand and cooking a lot of Southeast Asian and Macanese food myself, and also considering the Portuguese Southeast Asian trade, we think that back in the days, Jaggery may be made from palm fruit, which also has a very dark color. So when you are making Macanese food, you can consider using slab sugar, or if you can get palm sugar, maybe it will also be a good choice. Okay. Okay, pickled shallot. Anyone has any idea what it may be in Macanese cooking? Right. Yeah, some 大家可能都有啲觀眾應該估到，其實 pickled shallot 佢係指一樣好常見嘅廣式食材。咁因為如果我哋去睇翻直接揾 pickled shallot 嘅時候，你可能係覺得醃紅葱頭係咪？但係喺無論係廣式或者澳門或者東南亞，其實都好少見到醃紅葱頭呢個原料嘅。咁所以當時我哋就喺解呢個謎嘅過程中，其實就諗去睇翻好多出口嘅廣式食材，咁其實依家仲買得到㗎。其實就係酸蕎頭，因為蕎頭同埋紅葱咧，佢醃起身嘅時候個樣咧係好似嘅。咁依家你喺譬如北美嘅華人超市咧，你賣酸蕎頭嘅時候，佢可能都係寫住 pickled shallot。So in the process, we encountered this word, pickled shallot. And for us, we think that it just doesn't make sense that they are using actual pickled shallot because it's not something that's in Cantonese food or Southeast Asian food. It's not that common. So in the context, we just think about that, oh, that's probably actually 酸蕎頭, which is a very widely used ingredients in South China, Southeast Asia, or even in other diasporas, Chinese groups around the world. So in the book, we decided to refer to all pickled shallots as 酸蕎頭, and we think that makes more sense for the recipes. Okay, here's a fun one. Anyone know what this may mean? 三茶匙 carnation. Yeah, 冇錯冇錯。三湯匙淡奶，大家都比較熟。所以其實當時我哋因為依張食譜喺書入邊係有包含咗嘅，咁我哋見到依一點嘅時候，其實當時係有少少都係有啲困惑，因為大家可能會覺得哦係喎，咁肯定係淡奶啦，係咪？咁但係其實係要一個推測翻嘅過程咯。咁所以我哋睇翻佢依一個食譜，佢有蛋有 有麵粉、有糖、有牛油，咁其實佢應該就係一個蛋糕嘅食譜。咁樣再睇翻佢嗰個步驟，會撈埋啲粉啊、糖啊同埋淡奶，咁其實就 OK。咁應該就係指三花淡奶啦。So in this process, we saw this 3 tablespoons carnation, which many Cantonese people will probably, like our audience, already know what that means. It's evaporated milk, but we need to make sure that it's actually that. So we have to look into the recipe itself, and it looks like a cake recipe, which seems like it. So according to the context, we decided to translate it as 三花淡奶, as everyone knows in Cantonese cooking. OK， 咁仲係同一張食譜，咁呢個詞咧，呢個食譜佢指乜嘢咧？其實我哋係唔知嘅。呢個詞如果你去 Google 搜咧，你係搜唔到㗎。因為其實好多食譜嘅好多菜式嘅名咧，你係搜唔到㗎，佢已經係唔存在㗎啦。咁所以我哋就去根據呢個食譜去睇返一啲古老嘅葡萄牙食譜，咁就發現佢應該係源自於一款比較老嘅紙杯蛋糕。咁所以我哋就決定將佢譯成咗海綿蛋糕，因為根據佢嗰個食譜本身做出嚟嘅糖、麵粉、蛋嘅比例應該係比較結實嘅嗰種蛋糕，咁我哋就選擇譯成海綿蛋糕。So this term doesn't exist anymore. We don't know what that is. So in the process of translation, we have to look into the context and the actual recipe itself, and also the ratio of like flour, sugar, butter, egg, to kind of see that this is probably kind of a thicker, denser cake. So that we decided to use the term sponge cake, basically, for our Chinese, because in this process, we do kind of have to make some terms up for certain dishes that no longer exist. 有冇朋友知道呢個係咩嚟㗎？呢個亦都係一個唔再存在嘅一個詞嚟嘅。So we also seems like nobody knows what this is, neither did us. So 喺當呢個詞出現嘅時候咧，佢上下文咧係指編織嘅。如果你將呢個 tessellata 放去 Google， 你淨係見到搜出嚟嘅就係床單，好多好多床單。咁根據佢個文意咧，就係編織。咁呢個係我哋第一個線索。So when researching this term, we have no clue. When you put in tessellata on Google, all you get is sheets, bed sheets, and that's it. So according to the context in the book itself, tessel means weaving. And then we have our next clue. 咁仲有一個第二個 clue 咧，就係有一個葡式番茄醬煎蛋，即係 tomatada。咁呢個係我哋就一個唔係非常之清晰，但係都可以幫到手嘅一個線索嚟嘅。咁喺文中咧，佢係指當提到呢個詞嘅時候咧，作者係指採訪受訪者，佢係指一個雞蛋甜品嘅。咁我哋根據呢個編織同埋雞蛋，就估到佢應該係同葡國嘅嗰個蛋絲甜品係有啲聯繫嘅。So according to the context that we have weaving and egg, so we guess that it probably has something to do with the Portuguese dessert where you have a lot of egg strings. So we decided to translate it as egg string cake。咁我哋就決定將佢呢個詞譯成蛋絲蛋糕。咁其實我哋唔確定佢係咪蛋糕嚟嘅，但係就有蛋糕呢個詞嘅話，大家可以知道佢係一個甜品。 咁所以係一個提供一啲 context. So we decided to translate it as egg string cake so that people would know that it has egg string and it's a dessert. So, right. This is the Portuguese egg string. 呢個葡國蛋絲大家應該都曾經見過。咁我就嘗試去揾一啲蛋絲蛋糕嘅圖片啦。咁 This may be a egg string cake. We don't know. 跟住右邊呢張圖咧，大家如果成日去泰國咧，應該都會見過嘅。咁其實佢亦都係來源於葡國嘅呢個蛋絲甜品，佢就將嗰啲蛋絲放喺佢哋嘅 cannoli 上邊嗰個pancake 上邊。So the picture on the right is a dessert in Thailand, which the egg string also comes from Portuguese influence in Thailand, which is also a very popular street food up to this day. 咁接落嚟，我哋就睇下一啲我哋喺翻譯過程中選用邊一種中文翻譯嘅決定。OK， 咁大家其實可能都會知道粵語同埋廣東話其實佢係有對於好多食物佢係有唔同嘅用詞嘅。咁我哋作為面向港澳嘅繁體中文讀者咧，咁我哋就大部分都係選用咗粵語嘅。因為大家睇到，當你見到大菜糕、牛油芝士，你會知道佢係講乜嘢。咁我覺得喺即係睇翻廣東話、粵語同埋普通話佢嗰個用詞之間咧，其實亦都係同本書入邊嘅好多主題係相關。即係你用咩詞就證實咗，就講咗體現咗你係嚟自邊度嘅文化。So because Cantonese culinary culture has a lot of Western food ingredients coming many centuries ago, so Cantonese words actually have their own words for a lot of these ingredients or dishes itself. So during the translation process, we decided to use the Cantonese ones for our readers who are mostly based in Hong Kong and Macau with traditional Chinese. So it's a very interesting phenomenon within the Chinese language that when cultural contact was happened during different period of time, that it results in different way to refer to different things. 最後我哋快啲過幾個比較好玩嘅item。咁書入邊咧就講咗好多關於鹹蝦嘅重要性。咁東南亞大家應該都知道好多鹹蝦。咁唔知大家知唔知道蜆芥？大家都知啊，中意食廣東菜嘅人嘅大家都知。咁蜆芥咧，佢就係中三嗰帶嘅發酵嘅蜆肉啦。咁最有趣嘅地方咧就係佢係有辣椒同香料嘅。咁好可能係鑑於中山同小欖就喺澳門隔離，好可能係土生菜傳過去嘅。So with this pickled fermented clam, we don't know, but because Zhongshan and Xiaolan is right next to Macau, and it also has chili and spices, it may also just very well be a Macanese influence. We don't know now. There's no way to know, but it's maybe next time when you have it, keep that in mind. Okay, next one. And then another one. 另外一種咧就係比較類似嘅，就係生蟹汁。咁生蟹汁咧佢就喺北海沿岸，咁亦都係同一種比較類似嘅操作，就係用啲好細嘅蟹，咁啊洗乾淨，用鹽同埋酒醃成，咁亦都係比較相似嘅一種做法或者用法。用嚟蘸白切雞係非常之好食，下次大家可以喺北海買翻嚟試下。So pickled crab is another interesting ingredient that's coming from Beihai in the coastal Guangxi, which is also pickled seafood and it has very similar applications in cooking process that it also kind of tastes similar, that has like a very pungent, fragrant, fermented taste and smell. And curry captain, probably people also know what that is. 甲必丹咖喱大家應該都食過啦嚇，喺馬來西亞嘅時候，或者喺馬來西亞菜。咁其實佢就係可以總體嚟講係一個咖喱雞咯。咁但係大家有冇聽過曾經喺廣州嘅黃埔港，亦都有一味叫做 Country Captain 嘅菜。咁其實 Country Captain 咧，佢亦都係一道咖喱雞嚟嘅。咁呢一道菜咧係我哋自己喺度查資料嘅時候發現嘅。咁佢其實咧就係來自於呢一本書《廣州番鬼錄》。咁個作者咧，佢就提到喺印度中國貿易來往之間嘅船上邊咧，佢哋會食到一道叫做港腳船長。港腳就係 country 嘅嗰個音譯。係啊，以前嘅音譯比較搞笑嘅。咁就係呢一道菜。咁其實廣州嘅黃埔港亦都曾經出現過一道 Captain Curry， 或者同甲必丹咖喱比較似嘅一道菜。咁咖喱雞咧，佢已經成為咗粵菜啊茶餐廳依家嘅一個常駐項目啦。咁我覺得作為即係對呢個中西文化交融感興趣嘅觀眾咧，咁有時食嘅時候可能可以諗翻一下，究竟係點樣嚟嘅 ？OK。
下邊我哋可以開展一個Q&A 問答環節，大家聽眾有咩問題問作者啊，甚至問我哋嘅都可以。Now is the Q&A session. Everybody is invited to ask questions to the author or any of us. Thanks.
And also comments are very welcome, not just questions. Thank you. Your own insights.
相信在座各位都喺讀講者身上獲益良多。如果大家有任何問題想向講者提問，咁歡迎咧大家向工作人員示意啦。咁佢就會俾紙同筆，然之後大家可以將啲問題寫翻喺紙上面，再交翻俾工作人員嘅。咁我哋啱啱其實都已經收到有一條嘅問題咁樣嘅。咁呢條問題就英文，咁我就直接咁讀翻出嚟啦，係啦。So the question said that I'm a junior researcher in food anthropology. I've noticed that the relationship between identity and food has been extensively studied by many researchers. In academic circles, this relationship is not new. Do you think that the concept of identity is outdated, stale, or no longer explanatory? Additionally, obtaining menus is really difficult because informers are resistant. What is your take on this and how to handle it? Oh, the last. So additionally, obtaining menus is really difficult because informers are resistant. What's your take on this and how to handle it?
The first part is about food and identity. It seems to me that studying food at all within anthropology is actually quite new, probably not more than just a few decades. So I think there's a massive amount still to research and understand about food and identity. And one thing that's really striking me shall I call it increasing immigration and refugees moving around the world, is that food is being seen as a really great way for exchange of cultures to welcome refugees into different cities and to help the country who's receiving these refugees understand more about these people, so they're not just these numbers or whatever. Actually, they're real living human beings. And food is this amazing way, not just about my identity, but it's about your identity. And how can we understand each other better by sharing food? Do you want to translate that?
我快速咁樣概括一下作者問嘅答案。咁啱先有一位觀眾佢就問：依家因為身份同食物依個關係已經喺食物人類學有 好多嘅研究。咁依家佢係咪仲係一個重要嘅話題咧？咁作者嘅回答咧係嘅，因為依家呢個世界上有好多嘅越嚟越多嘅移民，同埋亦都好多難民，佢哋會去到唔同嘅地方生活。咁食物係一個非常之有用幫助大家去互相了解大家嘅背景文化嘅一個渠道。咁所以作者佢認為身份同食物嘅關係依然係非常值得研究嘅。
The second part related to the difficulty of capturing menus or let's say recipes. And I think if we are social scientists, as I am, I think we need to get much more creative in our research, and stuff shows up in very amazing places. I think sociologists and anthropologists could learn from historians in their research. We can probably, thank you, Professor Dubois, and also I love the fact that there's actually degrees in anthropology and archaeology, and I think we can learn a lot from archaeology. The unlikely sources, not just, oh, here's a menu, but gleaning information from different sources and working with, I quote Clifford Geertz again, his thick description, the ability to interpret and analyse and not just look at things face value.
OK， 咁作者佢後邊就講咗點樣去搜集菜譜，咁佢就提出我哋唔好淨係顧於一種最簡單、最直接嘅搜索方法，而係即係唔係話睇住依張係就係菜譜啦，依本就係菜譜書啦，咁我就唯佢是專。咁作者佢係建議大家去採取好多唔同嘅方式，譬如話參考歷史學嘅。考古學嘅或者其他方式，然後去學習佢哋點樣去研究一種食物，咁去採取，因為依家呢個世界呢個文化環境已經變得好唔同，所以作者鼓勵我哋大家去做一啲更加多元化嘅了解飲食文化嘅一啲嘗試。
咁就都仲有讀者提問啦，咁呢條都係英文嘅問題嚟嘅。Are there any ingredient sourcing issues during research or recipe testing that were particularly difficult?
That's a great question. The whole notion of fusion hybrid Creole cooking is learning about substitution. And I've said that some Macanese are very resistant, but one of my young she's around 30, a Macanese chef. She says Macanese cooking has always been about substitution, so she has no problem. She comes over to my place in Macau and says, oh, you know, this is like a pretend balichao, but, you know, that's what we've got, so that's what we'll use. And yes, it slightly changes the taste, but, you know, the cuisine has slightly changed in taste for hundreds of years and decades. So I'm all for substitution. I think that's what it's about. It's about creativity in the kitchen. And if we talk about, which we won't, authenticity, in inverted commas, there really is no such thing. So just use what you've got. And I guess as an addendum here, those of us who didn't learn to cook from our grandmother or mother are so like transfixed by the absoluteness of a recipe, and that's to our failing.
咁個讀者咪個聽眾提問就係話，有時咧你會唔會遇到一個問題，就係話某啲食材好難揾到？作者嘅回答就係話，其實咧我哋喺烹飪或者係烹飪嘅過程中咧，係要識得去揾到替代品，即係話可以就地取材，同埋我哋喺入廚嘅時候咧就要可以發揮下一啲創意嘅，即係有乜嘢就煮乜嘢。
Before the next question, can I just say something which I absolutely love that we looked at, we were talking about Chef Jose earlier. When he started playing around with Portuguese cooking in Lisbon, doing some kind of deconstruction, he was highly criticised, and young people would say, you know, I think my grandmother's dish was better than that. And he would say, It probably wasn't, because she was probably starting to use canned goods and convenience foods like Knorr stock cubes. The point is, you love your grandmother and you have this memory of food.
作者佢想補充一下，即係下一個問題之前，佢想再提一下豪西廚師，即係啱先我哋見到嗰位名廚。咁佢啱開始做呢啲葡國菜或者土生菜嘅時候咧，佢係遭到好多人嘅猛烈批評嘅，因為好多人都會話你咁樣整根本就不符合正統啦，又唔係我嫲嫲咁樣整啦，或者我媽媽佢係絕對唔會咁樣整嘅。咁呢位廚師咧，佢就非常之唔同意佢嘅意見啦，即係呢種意見，因為佢嫲嫲可能用嘅材料係唔一定咁好嘅，咁所以烹飪嘅話，其實好大程度上都係更加注重你點樣去發揮咯，而唔係固守一個傳統，然後一成不變。
咁就第3條問題，咁呢一條就係中文嘅問題嚟嘅。咁佢就有話呢位聽眾就話，佢話咁啱即係啱啱個講座入面都有提到話有一啲菜式啊，例如可能蜆芥咁樣係喺澳門咁傳去即係一啲其他地方傳過嚟澳門咁樣嘅。咁佢就話想知多少少有冇一啲係關於反而係澳門菜式傳翻去其他地方嘅例子咁樣咯。
Is there any Macanese dishes that spread to other places that we know of?
Within Macau, there are ever smaller number of Macanese restaurants. Again, I'm being a bit controversial. I could argue that there's one quote-unquote authentic one. There's a couple that are doing reasonable. There's restaurants that say they're Macanese when they're Portuguese. So already it's a problem finding Macanese food, decent Macanese food in Macau that hasn't been chefed up, if I can use that phrase. There are purportedly Macanese restaurants around the world. There's Fat Duck in Chicago, which has closed down. A friend of mine went and said it's vaguely Southeast Asian. There's one in Edinburgh, which got Best New Southeast Asian or Asian Restaurant in Edinburgh award recently. So obviously not really being classified as Cantonese. There's a restaurant just outside Malacca, which is more like cuisine cooking, I'm told, which obviously is a very close relative of Macanese, except that it uses the Rempah, the spices. There's one or two pop-ups in Lisboa, but this is all I've ever heard of in terms of the spread of Macanese food, except, of course, if I'm in England and cook minchi. That's a good spread, isn't it? And it remains my son's favourite dish to this day, and he will never eat it in a restaurant because it's Mama's minchi.
咁作者嘅回答就係話，其實澳門已經係有好多即係比較好嘅有土生菜餐廳啦。讀者嘅問題係問話有冇一啲土生菜式傳到出去出邊？其實係喺芝加哥或者馬拉卡即係馬來西亞都係有人咧係做土生菜餐廳嘅。咁佢仲講話，佢自己喺英國都有係傳承同埋煮呢個免治呢款土生菜，佢嘅仔女仲好中意，大概。
我快速咁補充一下，咁除咗即係土生菜餐廳之外咧，如果係作為一個菜式傳到去其他地方咧，咁其實我哋暫時都諗唔到佢係有一個文化上比較廣泛嘅傳播咯，咁所以
其實可能澳門傳到出邊嘅最簡單嘅一樣，佢唔係 dish 唔係菜，但係都係一個屬於 澳門出產嘅 create 喺澳門嘅就係葡撻啦，係咪？澳門蛋撻啦，我哋好多時喺中國大陸甚至喺香港應該都有傳到嚟呢邊，或者有麵包bakery 啊、麵包店啊或者餅店佢哋整啦。
The Portuguese tart, the puta, that's probably that one big thing that spread from Macau to around Southeast Asia and China by large.
But that's Portuguese, not Macanese.
Right, yeah.
But it was created in Macau, no?
The one that we know of nowadays is from Macau. 我哋大家講起葡撻應該都會諗到係澳門。
咁之後就仲有一條問題，咁呢條嘅問題就係英文嘅，咁佢就問就係 Did you feel any pull from external forces like intangible cultural heritage and commercial influences, etc., that are themselves trying to define Macanese cuisine?
Thanks for that question. I think I touched on this earlier, that Macau is trying very hard. Well, I didn't mention this part, to move away from gambling. And of course, Macanese cooking has intangible heritage. There are 22 buildings that have listed by UNESCO. It's really a problem to diffuse Macanese cooking, because once it gets into a casino hotel, it has to become something suitable for that environment. So this is going to be an ongoing problem. People don't understand what is Macanese food, including food and beverage directors and chefs in five-star hotels. So even if they don't know the difference, it's very hard to communicate. There's one Macanese restaurant, which I quite like in Macau, but I'm hearing that they're going to have Portuguese food as well, because the clientele is not necessarily enjoying or understanding Macanese food, and they're trying really hard to explain to guests why it tastes like that and why it's made of these kinds of ingredients. But they're really finding themselves on an uphill struggle. So that's another point, especially if you're trying to be an independent Macanese restaurant. You've got no economies of scale. And yet what the big hotel groups are doing, they've got all of those economies of scale, but they want to do a five-star version. Thanks for the question, but it's a really tough one, this one.
咁呢位讀者咧，佢就問有冇一啲嘗試去定義或者推廣土生葡菜嘅一啲努力咯。咁作者佢提到其實係有嘅，但係現實就比較殘酷啦，因為好多時賭場啊或者大酒店啊，佢哋有好多資源去做好多用主打或者推廣土生葡菜，咁但係問題係本身土生葡菜佢嗰個定義係唔係好清晰嘅，咁佢好多時候可能係會有土生菜或者同時亦都有葡國菜嘅，咁所以喺呢個過程中咧，土生菜同葡國菜佢變得係更加可能個定義會更加混亂啦。咁然後嗰啲獨立嘅比較堅持做土生菜嘅餐廳咧，咁因為佢哋本身係冇咁多資源，咁所以可能好多時佢哋好努力去嘗試維持呢個土生菜嘅傳統，因為佢本身唔係一啲太 fancy、太高檔嘅呈現出嚟，好似好貴嘅可以擺喺5星級餐廳嘅嗰啲菜啦。咁所以獨立土生餐廳佢做嘅啲努力咧係有限咯，所以作者佢嘅意見就係覺得依家對於土生菜嘅推廣同埋定義嘅現狀係不容樂觀嘅。
咁就呢度都仲有一條問題嘅，咁就佢呢位聽眾咧就問就話覺得土生菜佢國際化咧，佢就想知作者認為係因為澳門嘅社會文化所帶嚟啊，定係因為土生菜本身嘅菜式魅力，定係因為其他嘅原因
？The internationalized of Macanese food, is it because of the social cultural environment of Macau being a more international city, or is it because that Macanese food itself has all this charm and this cultural heritage coming from different parts of the world?
I think that question probably relates to the question we just had. Yes, Macanese food is difficult to understand because it isn't simple. One of the research methods I used was actually what we call broadly sort of Asia studies, trying to put Macau in a much bigger geographical context in order to understand it. The part about the internationalization of Macanese food, I'm not sure that has exactly happened, but what is happening is that we're reduced to we see maybe 2 or 3 Macanese dishes only, and they're ones which are more accessible or can be upgraded more easily. So Macanese, I mean, I imagine the day when minchi, since it's the most famous, is just, alongside Thai green curry and nasi goreng, and that's what Macanese food would be reduced to, something that's easy and accessible and can be made to look quite fancy. And I'm imagining in a hotel buffet, would you like light soy or dark soy? And you kind of construct your own minchi at this kind of counter thing. And my worry is that it will just become kind of cartoonish like that. And reduced from however many hundreds of dishes it was once to just a few.
作者嘅回答就係話，其實土生菜係比較難理解嘅。而家確實係有一啲國際土生菜邁向國際或者國際化嘅事情喺度發生緊。咁佢提到咧係有2至3個菜至少係經歷緊即係一個重新包裝 upgrade， 例如免治啦。咁咧土生菜因為佢比較繁複，即係佢個準備啊或者比較繁複，佢就認為應該係例如果將某啲菜式將佢簡單化。即推出一啲簡易嘅版本，可能會有利於佢嘅傳播。咁作者自身咧係對於佢嘅國際化係有保留嘅。
咁就由於時間關係啦，咁我哋呢度就係最後一條問題嘅。咁有聽眾就想問一問2位譯者啦，就話想知道有冇字係完全諗唔到點樣意譯，因為佢就話覺得可能頭先提到嘅一啲字，佢覺得即係佢估好多其他語言都會變做音譯，而唔係意譯咁
樣。關於意譯同音譯呢個問題咧，就大部分嘅菜名我哋會如果譬如好似有一道印度嘅charcuterie 個發音唔係好準，唔好介意。咖喱咁我哋就我哋選擇嘅做法就係當呢啲菜名佢出現嘅時候，佢已經可能唔係一道太常見嘅菜，咁我哋嘅選擇就會將佢嗰個原來嗰個名音譯出嚟，咁但係後邊會加一個名詞去解釋翻，譬如呢個 charcuterie 沙古提咖喱，咁呢個就係我哋選擇做嘅組合咯。因為對於讀者嚟講，如果我哋淨係叫一道菜做沙古提，大家係唔知佢係咩嚟嘅。咁所以我哋係就算係音譯嘅時候，即係實在係唔知佢呢道菜究竟係咩嘅時候，都會選擇去根據佢嗰個文意同埋佢去決定翻研究翻究竟佢一套大概屬於咩類型嘅菜，然後將佢個名音譯出嚟，然後再喺後邊加翻一個名詞解釋翻究竟大家睇到嘅呢個詞係咩嚟嘅。So I'll just quickly sum up this question. So a reader asked that in the translation process, do we need to is there any words that we need to resort to transliteration instead of translate the meaning out? And to that, my answer is that it often happens with some extinct dishes, the names which refer to something that's no longer existing. So what we have to do is to look at the context and decide on what this name means. That is it a curry? Is it a soup? Is it a cake? So, and then we'll have to transliterate that name itself into Chinese, and then add a noun after that name, like the charcuterie curry. We'll have to explain it to the readers that this name is actually talking about in this context is something like a curry. So this is how we are dealing with this kind of names that like nobody knows what it is, and we have to make sense for the readers to know that this is maybe a curry. It's a curry, yeah, right.
咁就今日多謝晒3位啦。咁我哋今日嘅活動咧就喺呢度結束㗎啦。咁我謹代表香港貿易發展局再次多謝 Annabel Jackson 女士、黎莊琳女士同徐彩燕女士，同埋在座各位嘅支持。唔該晒大家。